Hello. Hello, and welcome back. It's your girl Tasha with Girlfriend. Let me tell you the podcast because I have something to say. And I just want to let y'all know that I'm recording this episode in June of 2025, which means it's warm outside. It's warmer and it's getting warm outside. And whenever the sun comes out, it makes people want to mingle more, be seen more, get out the house more, all those things. And these are typically the months where you start meeting people. If you are an introvert, but you come out, in the spring and summer, this is a time when you start meeting people or you start running into people more, or you end up in places where you see different people that you've never seen before, you know. So I just wanted to say that if you're out there and you find you a boo thing or boyfriend, or if it's the season that someone gets engaged or married, I just want to say whenever it comes to deciding what you want in that relationship, ask for what you need for your ask for what you need for yourself. Okay? Don't try to compare your relationship to someone else's or look at someone else's relationship and say these are relationship goals. Don't do that. Just whenever you're making your vows or whenever you're writing down your ideal person or whenever you're having a conversation with them, telling them what you need to get out of being with them, then I want you to just say specifically what it is you need. I need someone who listens when I talk. I need someone who lets me know when maybe I'm talking too much. I need someone who loves to cuddle and hug and touch and show affection in public. I need someone who will give me money whenever I ask for. I need someone who can either fix my car or take my car to be serviced. I need someone who will go grocery shopping and cook the meals, or I need someone who will cook the meals and I do the shopping. Whatever it is that it is you want, relay that to that person. Okay. And the reason I'm saying this is because I have seen on Facebook and I've heard people say, I want that kind of love that my grandparents had. And I'm gonna be honest with you, that's why some of y'all are going through hell in your relationships because you want that same kind of love that grandma and grandpa had. And the problem with the relationship and the love and the dedication and all of that stuff, the problem with your grandparents' relationships is they didn't tell y'all everything that happened. You met them when all the drama was finished, whenever all the cheating was done, whenever all of the prayers were prayed, whenever they were too old to act ratchet. That's when you met your grandparents. That's when you realized or determined, hey, I want what they have. But for those of you who are saying that you want to be where your grandmother is, or y'all want the kind of husband that your grandma had and all that stuff, look, she went through some things. There are women out here right now. I have heard them tell their stories, but they have not agreed to come onto the podcast. I'm gonna still work on that though. But I have spoken to elderly women who said whenever their husbands were calm and loving and they were too old to do anything else. Their player days were over. They had to settle down with someone because, as you know, a lot of people do not like to die alone. They don't want to be alone. Even when they're unable to have intimacy in the bedroom with their partner, they still want someone there. They want to know that they can have somebody. A lot of people just don't want to die alone. They want to have a wife, a husband, a significant other, whatever the case may be. But I said all that to say that some of these grandparents with the lovey-dovey, you met them way after everything they went through. Because you have to keep in mind, back then, they were having a slew of kids. I was getting ready to say, I was getting ready to say they were having kids by the dozen, which some of them was, but still, back then they were having kids, like just having them back to back. A lot of us have great aunts and uncles, and there's like 13 of them from one woman. And then, like I said, a lot of our grandparents had to deal with cheating. So your grandma might have had 13 kids, but your grandfather had 35. So you have to think of that too. It's a lot of people who had to deal with their husbands living in the house and bringing their outside kids in. There are grandmothers who had to deal with their husbands not working, or the husband was working, but he wasn't bringing the money home. You have to deal with, we have to know that some of the grandfathers married a woman who degraded them, who didn't make them feel like a man. Then you had grandmothers that cheated too. And then you have the ones who got beat up, came in the house. Maybe they left to be with somebody, then came back. And here's something else you have to remember too. Excuse me, because I don't know how old my audience is that's listening to this specific episode, but I do want to say back then, like, because I was born in the 80s. So in the 60s, the 50s, well, even in the 80s, we didn't have cell phones. So there was no way for you to just be like, "Oh, I'm at work right now," or "I'm in the car," or "I'm on my way home," and like just talk to anybody anytime you wanted to. I don't even know when. Let me Google this. I want to see when the payphone was invented because that's something else. Okay, so according to Google, the first payphone was invented in 1889 when a Connecticut inventor, William Gray, was frustrated with having to beg to use a phone to summon a doctor when his wife took ill. He installed his first payphone in a Hartford bank. So if okay, so the payphone was invented in 1889, which means the payphone was around in the 60s and 70s and the 80s, but still there was no caller ID. So the dad could call from anywhere and say, he could call from across the street and say, "Hey, I'm 3 states over. I got a job," or whatever the case may be. The woman didn't have no way to figure her out. There was no caller ID. There was no star 69. There were no towers to pick up the phone call. So there was a lot of cheating going on. There were a lot of single mothers who lived with their husbands. And if that didn't make sense to you, there were women who were married and their husband was the father of their children, but she still had to do everything on her own. She had to bathe the kids, feed the kids, get them ready for school, love on them, bathe them, and then still go out and go to meetings, school meetings, or take them grocery shopping, or take them shopping, or whatever the case may be. Everywhere she went, the kids went. And the father would be at home, but he might not be present because he might be an alcoholic. My grandfather was an alcoholic. So there were a lot of women who had to deal with alcoholic husbands who did not help with the children because he was the man or whatever he called himself. And then you have to also think that sometimes the mother and the father, or the grandma and grandpa, great great grandma, whatever, they most of the time they didn't even sleep together. They lived in the same house. They had separate bedrooms. They didn't sleep together. And you have to think that back in the day, a lot of towns were considered small. I think even the cities were considered small, but I know they're still small today. So a lot of people know each other. And think about that whenever your husband has gotten another woman pregnant and you see her at the grocery store, or you see her at the clothing store, or you're taking your child to school, but you run into this woman that you know who has produced a new baby with your husband, and you have to see her, and there's no telling how many women you see who have slept with your husband. These are things that they had to go through in the back in the day. Okay, a lot of women were beaten by their husbands. Now I will tell you this: some of the women, the elderly women that I spoke to, they said they fought their husbands. They didn't say they got beat up. They didn't win all the fights, but they were fighting their husbands. So if you're one of those people and you want to fight, okay, keep on saying you want the same love that your grandparents had. Those women had to fight. And back then, the old men carried revolvers and they carried shotguns. It seems like almost every old man, grandfather had a shotgun. So some of our grandmothers had to be running for safety because their husband was chasing them with a shotgun. And then you also have The women who cheated and the husband came in and killed the boyfriend. Now, my cousin told me that story, one of my older cousins, and he was saying that he had taken his friend over to see a woman and he found out that the woman was married. And he was telling his friend, don't go up there. This woman is married. His friend went up there anyway. He said he sat in the car waiting for him to finish doing his thing and come back downstairs. Well, the woman's husband came home, went inside the apartment, and shot and killed his friend. And he said that he didn't know who got shot at first. He didn't know if his friend got shot or if his friend was a shooter. So he stayed out there long enough to wait and see what was going to happen. He said his friend didn't come outside, so he knew his friend had gotten killed. So imagine that too. Imagine you are a woman who's with a man who knows that you cheated because he killed your boyfriend. And now you have to imagine that you are the husband, um, that you are the husband who has had a baby by somebody else, and now your wife knows about it. You know what I'm saying? There was just a lot going on. So when you say you want the same love that your grandparents had, you better be specific. Because in order for them to get to wherever they were when you started paying attention, they had already went through a lot of things. They had gone through a lot of things. Okay? You had wives leaving husbands, husbands leaving wives. Um, you had women who were sick. You had women who had to deal with their husbands living just a couple of streets over. That brings me back to the payphone. So back then, you could live anywhere, and every home. I don't even think every home had a phone. It didn't, because my great uncle and his wife, they didn't have a phone. Everybody didn't have a telephone, and there was no GPS. There were no trackers to put on people. So there were men who lived in the same city as their wife or their first girlfriend or their first baby mama, and all of his women lived in the same town, but you never knew if you never went to that side or if you never went to that street. And again, you couldn't just get somebody's number and just call them, because you don't know who to call if you don't know who he's with, right? My dad and I lived in the same city my whole childhood, and I did not know. I thought that my dad lived in the county over, because a lot of his people are from that city, that town. And I saw his aunts, I saw his uncles, I saw his cousins. And I just thought, oh, well, my daddy must live here, because I spent summers there. I was like, my daddy must live here. No, he lived in the same city I did. And I found that out whenever I met my half siblings, and they were telling me that we went to school together. Now, I met my because I'm the oldest, but I met my oldest little brother and his sister. I met them in high school. And no, I'm lying. I met the sister in middle school, and I think I met my brother in high school. We all went to school together. And she was telling me, I used to see you in elementary school. I knew you. I didn't know who she was. And I did not know that my daddy lived in the same house that she did, because my dad had three more kids with her mom. But yeah, my dad and I lived in the same city. We sure did. But I was saying that again, your grandparents had to deal with gambling problems. They had to deal with debt. They had to deal with what I like to call homelessness. Even though people were living places, they were traveling. And you know how people be like, I live in North Carolina, but I'm moving to Chicago. I'm taking the train to Chicago. And whenever I watch movies, the older movies where people are moving, all they really take is like their clothes. And I'm like, so were they moving out of furnished homes and just going straight to another furnished home? Like no one took their furniture with them. They didn't take y'all didn't take your stove or your refrigerator. You didn't take your couch. Like they just get their one suitcase and move and start a whole new life. But that's how it was back then. You know, that sickness and health, you may have had a grandfather who wasn't supportive. So every time your grandmother got sick, she was by herself. You could have a grandfather who has dementia. And before he got dementia, he was just playing crazy. Anyway, I just want to say that you need to analyze the relationship that you have. And if you are having a conversation with that person about what you want, talk about what you want out of your relationship. Talk about how you want to handle difficult situations or difficult conversations. Talk about the challenges that you might face. Talk about the financial status of how you want the relationship to be. How much money you want to keep to yourself. Do y'all want to share a bank account? How do you want to do that? What are your spending habits? Have those conversations with that person so you can decide what you want. Because whenever you say, "Oh, I want a relationship like Will and Jada," or "I want a relationship like Eddie Murphy and his wife," whatever the case may be, or "I want a relationship like my grandma and them," you have to be careful with not being envious, but you have to be careful whenever you're asking for what somebody else has. Because if your grandparents were honest with you, you would know, oh, I don't want the trials and the tribulations. I don't want them. I just want to get to the part where y'all were loving each other. And you know what? Sometimes it takes years and decades for people to actually love each other to a point where they are at a serene place in life. Sometimes it does take that. Sometimes that kind of love is just not shared between people in their 20s or people in their 30s. It's just something to share with people who've been together for 20 or 30 years. And I do feel like you have to go through something in order to deeply fall in love. And whenever I say go through something, it doesn't have to be that for better or worse, where it has to be the cheating or it has to be the physical abuse or it has to be the gambling. Like sometimes you just want to go through something where you are in a position, you have an opportunity to defend your person or stand beside them or back them up. Maybe you go through something where one of you are sick, but going through something doesn't always have to be just, borderline, I don't want to be with you anymore, like last straw type shit. It doesn't have to be that. But yeah, I just wanted to say that. Some people are going through hell in their relationship because they want the same kind of love that their grandparents had. And they are literally going through the same cycle that their grandparents went through. This is going to take them a while to get to the finish line. But that's all I wanted to say today. I just want to share that thought with you all. I hope that y'all will subscribe, like, comment, share, do all those good things to continue to support me. I appreciate it. And there's a couple links in the video description, in the show description, that you can click on to get some things that I have on my website. All right. So, y'all have a great day. Again, my name is Latasha with Girlfriend. Let me tell you the podcast because I have something to say.